We are never far from the people we hate. That is why we can never be truly close to the people we love. The young Englishman keeps thinking about these painful words as he sails to a lonely island in the South Atlantic to work as a meteorologist. Lost in his thoughts, he is approached by Captain Axel, who lights a cigarette and tells him they are almost there. In September 1914, they finally reach the island, but nobody is there to welcome them. The young man was sent to replace the island's former weather observer, yet there is no sign of him. To make sure the man is safe, Captain Axel joins him in searching the island. They soon find a lighthouse and knock on the door, but no one answers. The young man forces the door open and meets the only other person living there, a cold and strange signal technician named Gruner. When Captain Axel asks about the previous meteorologist, Gruner casually says the man died from typhus. Gruner acts as if he does not care about them at all and even walks around naked. Annoyed, Captain Axel and the young man leave the lighthouse. After Captain Axel sails away, the young man begins exploring the island, realizing this lonely place will be his home for the next 12 months. His job is to study the winds and weather until someone arrives to replace him. Back at his cabin, he discovers the diary of the former meteorologist, whose name was Alder. Inside are sketches, a photo of Alder's wife, and drawings of strange creatures beside the lighthouse. The next morning, the young man notices mysterious circles made of rocks on the beach. Later, while observing the coast through binoculars, he spots Gruner lazily stretching outside. That night, while reading inside the cabin, he hears noises outside his door. At first, he assumes it is Gruner, but the sounds become louder, mixed with scratching and heavy movements. Suddenly, a reptile-like hand appears under the door. Shocked, he stomps on it, making the unseen creature angry. Hearing more creatures outside, he hides beneath the floorboards while they try to break into the cabin. The monsters search the place, but cannot find him. When everything becomes quiet, he peeks through a small crack in the floor. A creature suddenly looks back at him, and in fear, he stabs its eye with a knife. Terrified, he stays hidden underground for the entire night. The next day, he begs Gruner to let him into the lighthouse, but Gruner refuses and prepares to fight the creatures again. The young man returns to his cabin and spends the day strengthening it. He also discovers a rifle hidden under the floorboards, giving him hope that he can survive. When night falls, countless creatures slowly emerge from the darkness and surround the cabin. He fires at them one by one, but there are simply too many. Desperate, he starts a fire to drive them away. The flames scare the creatures off, but they also set the cabin ablaze. He barely escapes as the house burns. Luckily, rain begins to fall before the cabin is completely destroyed. The next day, he secretly follows Gruner from the lighthouse to the rocky shore. Just as he is about to confront him, a blue female sea creature suddenly attacks him. He points his gun at her, but Gruner stops him, showing that the creature is harmless and vulnerable. The young man offers Gruner some of his supplies in exchange for shelter in the lighthouse. After that, Gruner finally calls him a friend. Later, they return to the burned cabin to collect supplies. There, the young man realizes the truth. The previous meteorologist did not die from typhus. He was killed by the sea creatures. Gruner warns him that sunset is coming and the creatures will attack again soon. Together, they carry the supplies back to the lighthouse. Exhausted from the journey, the young man eventually collapses. One morning, the young man wakes up to the female sea creature licking his hand, trying to heal his burns. He learns that he has been asleep for 2 days. Later, he talks with Gruner while checking their remaining ammunition. Gruner explains that the creature, whom he calls a toad, is loyal like a dog and will never leave its master, no matter how badly it is treated. The young man is fascinated by her and believes she is different from the other creatures. But Gruner warns him not to trust her, saying her quiet nature may hide something evil. Gruner then gives him a tour of the lighthouse and brings him to the top. The young man asks why Gruner stayed on the island instead of leaving when the ship arrived. Gruner replies that he no longer wants to return to civilization because, on the island, he controls his own life. Still, the young man says he plans to leave on the next ship that arrives. Gruner simply wishes him luck. Later that day, the young man realizes how much only a few days of isolation have already changed him. While organizing his belongings, he notices the female creature nearby. He quietly watches her as she foolishly tries to eat a candle. He attempts to explain what the candle is for, but Gruner suddenly calls him upstairs and orders him to bring his rifle. That night, the young man watches Gruner prepare for another attack. Gruner gives him instructions before firing a flare gun into the sky, signaling the start of the battle. At the same time, the female creature cries out loudly while countless sea creatures rush toward the lighthouse. Gruner immediately opens fire, but the young man becomes overwhelmed with fear. Frozen in panic, he slowly backs away until he faints. Gruner is left alone to fight the terrifying swarm. The next morning, Gruner angrily scolds the young man for being useless and orders him to fetch water instead. When the young man returns with the water, he hears strange pounding noises and cries coming from Gruner's room. To his shock, he sees Gruner forcing himself on the female creature. Disturbed, he quickly walks away. Later, The two eat lunch in complete silence. The young man feels uncomfortable and guilty, unable to confront Gruner about what he saw. Finally, Gruner slams the table and tells him that he only has one final chance to prove himself. That night, Gruner fires the flare gun again to attract the creatures. When the monsters attack, the young man panics once more. Furious, Gruner locks him outside on the balcony, forcing him to fight for himself against the creatures. Even while hearing gunshots and the young man's desperate cries for help, Gruner eventually falls asleep. By sunrise, Gruner is shocked to find the young man still alive, covered in blood and staring at him blankly. As months pass, the two men fall into a routine. The creatures attack night after night, forcing them to stay alert constantly. The days become repetitive, the nights feel longer, and only nature keeps them from losing their sanity. The young man spends his days fetching water, while Gruner repairs and maintains their weapons. One day, the young man wonders if the creatures keep returning to rescue the female creature from the lighthouse. He also questions why she allows her own kind to be killed and why the attacks stop on certain nights. Gruner does not care about the reasons. He only wants to destroy every creature. Later, the young man returns to the remains of his old cabin to recover some belongings. Looking at himself in a mirror, he notices how much he has changed. He trims his beard, hoping to feel like his old self again. On his way back, he discovers the giant skeleton of a whale and takes a piece of it with him. That night, there is no attack. The young man realizes that the quiet moments between battles can sometimes feel worse than the battles themselves. Even so, they use the peaceful night to prepare for the next attack. While wandering around the island, the young man finally approaches the female creature and touches her cold skin for the first time. He slowly grows attached to the strange creature and gives her the name Anaris. Unlike him, Gruner treats Anaris badly, using her as both a servant and for his own pleasure. One evening, Gruner invites the young man to play chess. As they play, the young man shares his ideas and theories about the sea creatures. But Gruner tells him to stop talking and focus on the game, pushing him to make his next move. Suddenly, Gruner grabs his rifle and aims behind the young man. A sea creature has appeared nearby. The attack begins once again. The two men rush higher into the lighthouse as more creatures swarm around them. They fire their rifles, but the sudden attack quickly overwhelms them. With no other choice, they retreat to the lantern room at the top of the lighthouse, where the bright light keeps the creatures back. While escaping upstairs, Gruner is badly bitten on the foot before locking himself inside. They spend the entire night trapped there as the creatures claw and slam against the glass. Believing he is about to die, Gruner sadly sings an old love song until sunrise finally drives the monsters away. The next morning, Anaris cares for Gruner's wounded foot by licking the injury with her tongue. The two men realize they cannot survive many more attacks because they are running low on supplies, bullets, and hope. Later that day, while walking outside, the young man spots a ship far away at sea. Excited, he rushes to grab the flare gun so the ship can see them. But Gruner suddenly stops him and wrestles him to the ground. Deep down, Gruner fears being abandoned alone on the island. Anaris tries to protect the young man, which only angers Gruner more. Gruner storms away carrying the flare gun. Frustrated, the young man yells at him, saying he is terrified of being left behind to fight the creatures alone. Later, the young man tries to communicate with Anaris by showing her a small boat he carved from whalebone, hoping she understands what he means. Anaris then leads him to an abandoned rowboat hidden near the shore. Back at the lighthouse, the young man tells Gruner about the boat. Gruner explains that he already knew about it. According to him, a Portuguese sailor once escaped a shipwreck using that boat, but the sea creatures eventually killed him. Gruner also reveals that the wrecked ship carried dynamite, though he believes the explosives are probably ruined by water. The young man becomes interested in diving down to the wreck using an old diving suit to recover the dynamite. Gruner strongly disagrees, warning him that it is basically a suicide mission. One afternoon, the young man repairs and paints the rowboat, hoping it can still be used. Soon after, he hears strange howling nearby and discovers Anaris swimming in the water. He removes his clothes and slowly approaches her, almost as if he is about to kiss her. Unknown to them, Gruner secretly watches from a distance. Later, back at the lighthouse, Gruner suddenly gives the young man the diving suit. After seeing the bond between him and Anaris, Gruner changes his mind and secretly hopes the dangerous mission will kill him out of jealousy. The next day, the two men sail out to the shipwreck in the rowboat. Before diving, the young man explains that he will communicate by tugging the rope attached to the suit. If he pulls 3 times, it means he needs more air. Wearing the heavy diving suit, he descends underwater and searches for the crates of dynamite, while Gruner controls the rope from above. He eventually finds the explosives and begins tying several boxes to the rope. But while underwater, he suddenly notices a baby sea creature staring at him through the glass of his helmet. Startled, he falls and panics as more creatures begin surrounding him. Above the water, Gruner hesitates while holding the rope, almost ready to abandon him. At the last second, the young man breaks free from the diving suit and swims desperately back to the surface, where Gruner finally helps pull him into the boat. When they return to the lighthouse, they check the crates from the shipwreck. They discover that only one box of dynamite is still dry enough to use. Winter is approaching, so the young man and Gruner create a plan. They want to lure as many sea creatures as possible into the lighthouse and then blow up the dynamite to scare the creatures away for good. But that night, no creatures attack. 3 weeks pass quickly, and Gruner becomes impatient while waiting for another assault. One day, the young man finds Gruner standing outside in the cold, desperately waiting for the creatures to return. The young man tells him to come inside and stop worrying about the detonator for a while. Later, the young man and Gruner wait for Anaris to bring food for lunch. But instead of fish, she returns with starfish. Angry, Gruner kicks her and blames her for warning the other creatures about their plan. Furious, he grabs the young man by the shirt and says their new strategy is to leave the lighthouse door open and trap the creatures inside. That night, the young man waits near the open door while Gruner stays upstairs, ready to explode the dynamite. Hours pass, and nothing happens. Believing the young man's theory that the creatures are connected to Anaris, Gruner drags her beside him and forces her to cry out loudly, hoping the sound will attract the others. Suddenly, a sea creature attacks the young man at the entrance. He barely escapes as more creatures rush into the lighthouse. He runs upstairs and warns Gruner that the monsters are already inside. The creatures swarm the lighthouse, but Gruner fails to detonate the explosives. The young man quickly races to the top floor and reconnects the detonator himself. Moments later, a massive explosion destroys many of the sea creatures. Still unsatisfied, Gruner triggers another set of explosives closer to the lighthouse. The blast knocks both men unconscious. The next morning, the young man wakes up and immediately searches for Gruner. Relieved, he finds him alive. Gruner slowly wakes and begins singing a song. This time, the young man joins him. Outside, the beach is filled with dead and wounded creatures. Gruner walks among them with a spear, killing the survivors. While examining one of the dead creatures, the young man notices it is wearing a necklace. He begins to believe the creatures are more intelligent and civilized than Gruner claims. Angrily, Gruner tears the necklace away and throws it into the sea. That evening, while waiting for another attack, the young man hears Anaris and the remaining creatures crying in grief for the dead. Gruner then reveals that years ago he rescued Anaris when she was trapped in a fishing net as a baby. Ever since then, he believed she owed him her life. When Anaris disappears, Gruner says she will always return because no one leaves Gruner. The young man begins to regret the violence they caused, but Gruner feels no guilt for killing the creatures. One morning, the young man arranges stones in the sand and places the small carved bone boat in the center, hoping it might somehow lead to rescue. Meanwhile, Gruner continues preparing more explosives, expecting another attack. But once again, no creatures appear that night. Later, while cleaning the lighthouse as Gruner sleeps, the young man discovers an old wedding photograph. Written on the back are the words, "Love, love, love." He realizes the woman in the photo is the same woman from Alder's diary. At that moment, the young man understands the truth. Gruner is actually the former meteorologist, Alder himself. He realizes Gruner still has some humanity left inside him, despite everything. The young man then stops counting the days on the island. He understands that survival is now the only thing that matters, and the reason he first came there no longer matters anymore. Later, while standing on the shore and removing the carved bone from the sand, the young man suddenly sees a child sea creature approaching him. Behind the child stands Anaris, now stronger and more confident, surrounded by several other creatures. The young man realizes they may be offering peace, but Gruner refuses to accept it. He only demands that Anaris return to him. When she refuses, Gruner angrily repeats the same words again and again. No one leaves Gruner. As the young man walks back toward the lighthouse, Gruner suddenly fires a flare gun at the child sea creature, hitting him in the chest and killing him. Anaris looks at the young Ma with sadness and disappointment before leaving with the others, abandoning him. Gruner continues firing at the creatures, but the young man rushes at him. The two struggle violently until the young man throws Gruner to the ground and stabs him in the leg. Filled with rage, Gruner gets back up and gains control of the fight. He raises an axe and tries to kill the young man. But the young man calls him by his real name and tells him that he is not a murderer. Hearing this, Gruner suddenly stops. He drops the axe and quietly says, "Love, love, love." For a moment, it seems as though the man has finally remembered who he truly was. Gruner then walks outside and stares into the night sky. Soon after, the sea creatures attack and kill him. A few months later, another ship finally arrives at the island with a replacement meteorologist. When the captain sees the young man living in the lighthouse, he mistakenly calls him Gruner. The young man does not correct him. Gruner has left behind his role, and the young man silently takes his place. Standing on the lighthouse balcony, the new Gruner watches several boats in the distance while Anaris swims freely in the sea. The young man escaped one nightmare only to find another on the island. He came searching for peace and emptiness, but instead found fear, loneliness, and monsters. Yet in the end, he finally discovers peace after understanding one important truth. Without love, there is no real life, no hope, and no humanity.
And that's the end of the story. I hope you liked it. Comment down below what movies do you like us to recap next. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Until next time.